each time I hear Luke's rendition of the first time John and Jesus meet. It intrigues me just a little. Why? Because years later, when Jesus presents himself to John at the river for baptism, beyond the fact that John sees the Lord, he doesn't seem to recognize Jesus as his cousin. That really sounds crazy, because they were cousins. But maybe it's not so far-fetched. How many of us here really are in close contact with our cousins? Maybe a family reunion here or there might help. But unless our families are close, maybe we've met cousins once or twice in our lives, and we probably couldn't really pick them out of a lineup if we tried. Still, in today's gospel reading, it is apparent that John and Jesus either have a connection of some kind before they are born, or Elizabeth is so excited about seeing Mary, the long-lost cousin, that she mistakes the butterflies and the enjoyment of seeing family with a reaction of John to Jesus. Me, I go with the connection idea. Why? Because with God all things are possible. Besides, today's story really isn't about John and Jesus, nor is it about Elizabeth and Mary. It is about our witness of the grace of God as it is revealed in and through us and those God places in our lives. I just did a wedding this past week for a young lady who I knew at my last parish. And I shared with her in my homily and her husband something I share with every couple that I've married. That the love that they know, that they share, is really God's love, made known to them through one another. And that as their love for one another grows, so does their awareness of God's love for them. Now, this idea of needing someone else to know God may sound a little bit out there. But I struggle to find any other way to explain it. If we looked for God in the mirror instead of through others, how soon before we think so highly of ourselves that we look down on others? Or if we love ourselves so deeply that we soon have no room to love another? Or if we seek God in an inanimate object, how can we realize a relationship with something that is incapable of responding to our plea for companionship? I think God knows this about us. For years, God reached out to Israel in an effort to let them know how much God wanted to restore the relationship they once shared. And Israel did not respond. Probably because they were so consumed with self-glorification, self-gratification, and self-righteousness, they could no longer see God in one another. To overcome their tendencies, our tendencies, with these weaknesses, God did what God could do. God came among us as one of us so that we might see God through someone who is just like us. There's no question that from his beginning time on earth, Jesus looked and lived as one of us. Was there something special about him? Well, according to today's gospel, you bet there was. Those who came in contact with him even when he was in the womb, rejoiced, knowing that God was near. Yet we know not everyone rejoiced. If you remember a few weeks ago, I said that it had been about 400 years between Malachi, the last prophet of the Old Testament, and John the Baptist, the first prophet of the New. And as a result of this gap in realized relationship, Israel, for the most part, didn't rejoice because they did not recognize God when God encounters them. Just as John the Baptist fails to recognize Jesus years later at the river. With all their focus on self, they had forgotten what being in a real relationship looked like. So God does the one thing God can do to help them and us. God comes among us to show us. Now, for some of us, it's like putting on a fresh set of glasses. We get to see what before we could not. Now, when something all of a sudden appears in front of us, we respond in one of two ways: in fear or joy. Look at Mary. When God first approached her through the angel Gabriel, her first response was one of great fear and trembling. But what were Gabriel's words? Mary, fear not. You have found favor with God. The God who Israel thought had abandoned them, Mary learns did not return to judge them, but to offer them grace and mercy through the Son she would bear. Is it any wonder then that when she encounters Elizabeth, another woman who God is doing great things through, that they join in joyful song? Elizabeth, a woman thought to be too old to bear children, and Mary, a girl thought to be too young to do the same, come together to celebrate, not grieve, what God is doing through them. How many of us today could do the same? How many of us could find grace in the midst of something as unforeseen as the birth of an unexpected child, or a tragedy that turns our world upside down? It would be a major challenge were it not for the fact that Jesus did come among us to show us how. An encounter that we are going to celebrate tomorrow night and Tuesday morning. As we prepare for our encounter with God this holiday season, let each of us respond joyfully to our renewed awareness of who God is and what God is doing in and through our lives. And let us not only celebrate the blessings of the past or the blessings we enjoy today, but the blessings yet to come. Blessings that reveal the generosity of God's grace and mercy. Blessings that call us to respond in a way that builds and strengthens our relationships with God and with one another.